She had not planned to fall in love with the wedding. That was the first mistake, and she knew it the moment she signed her name on the marriage license 3 weeks ago, watching the ink dry under fluorescent light in a government office in Seoul that smelled like burnt coffee and old paper. Naomi Whitfield had come to Korea to close a business deal, not to become the wife of a man whose name made grown men lower their eyes when they said it. But contracts had a way of becoming something else entirely when the man across the table decided he wanted more than a signature. Now she stood in the elevator of Cho Tower, 61 floors of black glass, rising over the Han River, holding a manila folder against her chest like a shield. Inside it were divorce papers, drafted by a lawyer she had paid in cash so there would be no trail back to her. The elevator numbers climbed. 50, 55, 58. Her stomach climbed with them, tightening with every floor, because she was about to do something no one in the city did. She was about to walk into Jian Cho's office and tell the most dangerous man in Seoul that their marriage was over before it had properly begun. The doors opened onto the top floor, and the air itself seemed to change temperature. Everything here was engineered for intimidation. The marble floor polished to a mirror shine, the floor-to-ceiling windows that turned the city into a diorama laid out for one man's convenience, the silence, so complete she could hear her own heels against the stone. 2 men in dark suits flanked the hallway, hands folded, eyes tracking her, without a single word. She had learned in 3 weeks that silence was currency in this world. The less someone said, the more power they held. She did not wait to be announced. She pushed through the double doors of his office, and there he was, sitting behind a desk of black lacquered wood, sleeves rolled to the forearm, a fountain pen resting between 2 fingers like an afterthought. Jian Cho did not look up right away, and that was somehow worse than if he had. He finished the line he was writing, set the pen down with deliberate precision, and only then lifted his eyes to her. His eyes were the color of wet stone, gray-brown and unreadable, and they moved over her the way a man reads a contract he has already decided to sign. Naomi. He said her name the way he always did, like it belonged to him alone. Syllables slowed down just enough to feel like a hand at the small of her back. You do not knock anymore. I'm not staying long enough to need permission. She crossed the room and set the folder on his desk with more force than necessary, the papers sliding slightly out of alignment. Sign it. He did not move to open it. He studied her instead, the black dress she had worn like armor, the folder between them like a border drawn in the sand. What is this? Divorce papers. Her voice did not shake, though her hands, tucked at her sides, had curled into fists to keep from doing exactly that. I want out, Jian. I signed a marriage contract, because you made it very clear what would happen to my company if I didn't. That obligation is over. The papers say, I want nothing from you. No money, no property, no claim on anything with your name on it. I want my name back, and I want to go home. Something shifted behind his eyes, so brief, she might have imagined it if she had not spent 3 weeks learning to read every micro-expression that crossed his face like weather crossing a mountain. He opened the folder at last, scanned the first page, without touching the pen. Then he closed it again. No. That's not an answer. It is the only answer you are going to get. He stood, and the room seemed to shrink around his height, the way it always did, the way she hated that it did. He rounded the desk slowly, each step unhurried, a man who had never once in his life needed to move quickly for anyone. You are not leaving, Naomi. You can't keep me here. I am not keeping you anywhere. You are my wife. He stopped an arm's length from her, close enough that she caught the low note of cedar and something darker underneath, a scent she had started noticing in rooms before she saw him enter them, a fact she despised about herself. A wife does not require permission to stay married. She requires a reason to leave, and you have not given me one that I believe. I don't owe you belief. No. His mouth curved, not quite a smile. But you will find that I am difficult to convince otherwise. She snatched the folder back off the desk before he could decide it belonged to him now too. I'll file it myself then. With or without your signature. You will find that harder than you expect. He said it without threat in his voice, which made it worse, because threats she could fight, and this was simply fact laid flat on the table between them. There are men outside these doors who exist to make sure inconvenient truths do not reach a courthouse. I would rather you not become one of them. Her pulse spiked, and she hated that too, hated that fear, and something else entirely close to fear moved through her body at the same speed when he stood this near. Is that a threat? It is a warning. He reached out, and for one suspended second, she thought he might touch her face, but his hand averted instead to the folder still clutched against her chest, fingers closing gently over the edge of it. You came here to end something. I am telling you it is not yours to end alone. She yanked the folder free. Watch me. She turned and walked out, and he let her go, which unsettled her more than if he had stopped her, because Jian Cho did not let things go. He calculated. He waited. And 3 weeks into this arrangement, she had learned that his patience was its own kind of violence, slower and more precise than any gun. She did not make it past the lobby of Cho Tower before her phone buzzed with a message from her assistant, Iris Baptiste, a woman who had been with her since the start of her firm and had flown to Seoul the moment Naomi's world had turned sideways. Come to the hotel. Something happened at the office. Naomi's stomach dropped through the marble floor. She hailed a cab instead of waiting for the tower's private car, unwilling to owe Jian Cho even that small courtesy tonight. The office in question was a rented suite 3 blocks from her hotel, the temporary headquarters for the deal that had brought her to Seoul in the first place, a hospitality contract for a chain of boutique hotels her firm had spent 18 months courting. When she arrived, Iris was standing outside the door, arms wrapped around herself despite the mild evening air. Someone broke in, Iris said before Naomi had even reached her. Nothing stolen, but they left something. Inside, the office had been searched with surgical precision, drawers left slightly open, files shifted a centimeter from where they belonged, small enough that only someone who had spent years memorizing her own filing habits would notice. On her desk sat a single photograph. It was her, walking into Cho Tower that very afternoon, time-stamped an hour before she had arrived. They were watching me before I even got there, she said quietly. Naomi. Iris's voice had dropped low. Careful. Who would do this? She did not answer immediately, because the honest answer had too many possible names attached to it, and every single one of them belonged to men who orbited her husband's world like moons caught in a gravity, while they could not escape. It could be a rival faction sending a message. It could be someone inside Jian's own organization testing whether she was a liability. It could be, and this thought made her stomach turn colder than the others, someone trying to determine whether removing her permanently would cause Jian Cho more pain or less trouble. Her phone rang. Unknown number, Seoul area code. She answered against her better judgment. Ms. Whitfield. A man's voice, unfamiliar, calm in a way that felt rehearsed. You should not have come to Korea for that hotel deal. Some contracts are not worth what they cost. The line went dead before she could respond. She stood there with the phone still pressed to her ear, listening to nothing, feeling the photograph on the desk like a physical weight in the room. I'm calling the police, Iris said, already reaching for her own phone. No. Naomi's voice came out sharper than she intended. Not here. Not in the city. The police in Seoul answer to people who might answer to my husband's enemies. We don't know who's compromised. Then who do we call? Naomi looked at the photograph again, at her own unaware face captured through what had to be a telephoto lens from a rooftop or a parked car. She thought of Jian's hand closing over the folder, of the warning in his voice that had not sounded like a threat because it had not needed to. She thought of the 2 men in dark suits standing outside his office like fixtures of the building itself. She hated what she was about to do. We call the one person who has the resources to actually find out who did this. Iris understood before she said the name. You're going back to him. I don't have a choice. The car Jian sent arrived within 11 minutes of her call, which told her everything about how closely she was still being watched even after walking out on him hours earlier. She rode in silence, watching the city blur past the tinted windows, neon signs smearing into ribbons of color, and by the time she reached Cho Tower again, Night had swallowed the skyline whole, and the building glowed like a black monolith lit from within. He was waiting for her this time, standing at the window of his office rather than seated behind the desk, his back to the door when she entered. He did not turn immediately. "You came back. Someone broke into my office, left a photo of me walking into this building." She set the photograph on his desk, harder this time than the folder earlier. "A man called my phone and told me the hotel deal wasn't worth what it would cost me. I want to know who." Now he turned, and whatever calculation had been running behind his eyes when she walked out earlier had shifted into something colder, more focused. He crossed to the desk and studied the photograph without touching it, the muscle in his jaw working once before stilling. "This was taken from the building across the street from your office." His voice had dropped into a register she had not heard before, low and precise, a man rearranging pieces on a board only he could see. "The timestamp says 4:15. You arrived at your office at 4:50. "How do you know that?" "Because I know where you are at all times, Naomi." He said it without apology, and something about the flatness of the admission unsettled her more than if he had said it with menace. "Not because I am obsessive. Because 3 weeks ago someone tried to have you removed from a business meeting in a way that would have looked accidental, and I decided that would not happen again." Her breath caught. "What are you talking about?" "A car that nearly struck you outside your hotel the second week you were here. You believed it was reckless driving." His eyes held hers, unflinching. It was not. The floor seemed to tilt slightly beneath her feet. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you were already trying to leave a marriage you agreed to under pressure. I put on you. Telling you that you had also become a target because of that marriage would only have confirmed every reason you had to run." For the first time since she had known him, something like genuine frustration moved across his face, quickly smoothed away, but not quickly enough that she missed it. "I did not want to be the reason you were afraid to sleep in this city. I'm your wife on paper. That doesn't mean you get to decide what I'm allowed to be afraid of."
"No."
He exhaled, and it was the first unguarded sound she had heard him make. "It does not. I am telling you now because pretending otherwise has clearly failed." She sat down slowly in the chair across from his desk, the fight draining out of her legs even as her mind kept working. "Who wants me gone badly enough to do this?" "There are 3 organizations in this city that would benefit from destabilizing my position." He moved to pour 2 glasses of something amber from a decanter on the side cabinet, setting one in front of her without asking if she wanted it. "The Han family, who lost the northern shipping routes to me 2 years ago, and have wanted them back ever since. The Beck Syndicate, who believe my marriage to an American businesswoman signals weakness rather than strategy. And a smaller faction led by a man named Sun Woo-young, who was passed over for a position I gave to someone else, and has never forgiven me for it." "Which one do you think it is?" "I do not think. I confirm." He set his own glass down untouched. "Which is why you are not returning to that hotel tonight, and why the hospitality contract you came here to finalize is now the least important thing in this city. That contract is my company, Jian. I can't just abandon it because things got complicated." "Things did not get complicated." His voice sharpened. "Someone is trying to kill you to send a message to me. That is not complicated. That is a fact you need to survive, and surviving requires you to listen to me for once instead of walking out of every room I am standing in." She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him that she had survived plenty of things without a mafia boss deciding her schedule for her, but the photograph on his desk stared back at her with an unblinking honesty that made the argument feel small. She thought of the phone call. The way the man's voice had been calm, unhurried, a professional delivering a professional warning.
"Phoenix."
The word tasted bitter in her mouth. "Tell me what you need me to do." Something in his posture eased, not much, but enough that she noticed it. "Stay here tonight. Not for sentiment. For security. Tomorrow I will have my people trace the photograph and the phone number. And you will not go anywhere in this city without at least one of my men within reach. I don't like being handled. I am aware." A ghost of something almost fond crossed his face before vanishing. "You have made that abundantly clear since the day I met you." Iris was given a room 2 floors below in the residential wing of the tower Naomi had not even known existed, A discovery that told her exactly how much of Jiancho's world had been hidden from her even while she lived inside it as his wife. Naomi's own room, she learned, was directly adjacent to his, connected by a single door she made a point of locking from her side the moment she was left alone. Sleep did not come easily. She lay in the dark of an unfamiliar bed in a building 60 floors above the city, listening to the hum of climate control and the distant murmur of Seoul below, and she thought about the version of herself that had flown into this country 18 months ago with nothing but a pitched deck and a plane ticket. That woman had not known that closing a deal could mean marrying its architect. That woman had not known that leaving would prove this difficult. A knock came just after midnight, soft, deliberate. She rose and cracked the door to find Jian standing in the hallway, still dressed though his tie was gone now, top button undone, a folder of his own tucked under one arm. "I found something." She let him in without deciding to, and he laid the folder open on the small table by the window, photographs and documents spread beneath the city lights bleeding through the glass. The building the photograph was taken from is owned by a shell company registered to an address in Incheon. That address belongs to Sun Woo-young, the one who was passed over. Yes.
His jaw tightened.
He has been quiet for 8 months. I assumed he had accepted his position, or found another path forward. I was wrong. So, he's the one trying to kill me. He is the one trying to frighten you into leaving me, which he believes will weaken my standing enough to challenge for territory. Jian's eyes met hers, and for the first time, she saw something in them that looked almost like an apology. I did not think he would move against you directly. I underestimated how much of an asset you have become to my position simply by existing as my wife. An asset. She let the words sit between them, bitter as the whiskey she had not drunk earlier. Is that what I am to you?
No.
He said it too quickly for it to be calculated, and that surprised her more than the answer itself. That is what you are to the men who want to hurt me. To me you are, he stopped, jaw working, a man unaccustomed to finishing sentences that ended in vulnerability. You are the first person in 3 years who has looked at me and seen a man instead of a position. I did not expect to want to keep that. The confession landed in the quiet room like a stone dropped into still water, ripples she could feel moving through her own chest. She should have said something cutting, should have reminded him that wanting to keep her was not the same as earning the right to, but instead she found herself asking, what happened 3 years ago? His expression closed slightly, an old door swinging shut on old hinges. My sister was killed in a conflict meant for me. Her name was Yuna. She had nothing to do with this world. She taught piano to children in Busan and had asked me for years to leave the family business before it cost me everything. I told her I would, eventually. I did not move quickly enough. His voice had gone very quiet. After that I stopped letting anyone close enough to become a target. Until you sign a contract you thought was only about hotels. Naomi's throat tightened around words she had not expected to need.
I'm sorry, Jan.
I am not telling you this for sympathy. He straightened, some of the armor sliding back into place. I am telling you because you deserve to understand why I have made choices about your safety that felt like control instead of care. I do not know how to protect someone without also caging them. It is the only method I have ever had that worked. That's not an excuse.
No.
It is an explanation. He held her gaze. I am not asking you to forgive it tonight. She did not respond right away, and in the silence that stretched between them she became aware of how close he was standing, how the low light caught the sharp line of his jaw, how his hands, always so controlled, had curled slightly at his sides as though restraining themselves from something. She thought of the divorce papers still sitting untouched in her hotel room. She thought of Yuna, a woman she had never met, dead because of proximity to a man who could not stop loving the people who came near him even when loving them got them killed. I need to think, she said finally, stepping back before the moment could become something neither of them was ready for. About all of it. The marriage. The danger. Whatever this is. Take the time you need. He gathered the folder from the table, pausing at the door. But do it here, where I can keep you alive long enough to make the decision. The next 2 days moved with the strange, suspended quality of a held breath. Jian's men traced Sun Wuyang's movements through the city, mapping a pattern that suggested he was building towards something larger than a single act of intimidation. Naomi, restless in the confines of the tower, insisted on returning to her rented office to retrieve documents for the hospitality deal, a decision Jian allowed only after assigning 2 men to accompany her and after making her promise to keep her phone on a direct line to his. It was on the second visit to the office that everything accelerated. She was midway through pulling files from a locked cabinet when Iris burst through the door, face pale. "There's a car outside. It's been parked across the street for 20 minutes. Same make as the one that almost hit you." Naomi's hands stilled over the folder in her lap. Through the window she could see it, dark and unremarkable except for the fact that it had not moved, engine idling, exhaust curling faintly into the evening air. One of Jian's men, a broad-shouldered man named Doyen, moved immediately to the window, hand drifting to the inside of his jacket. "We need to leave," he said.
Now.
Through the back stairwell. They moved fast, Naomi grabbing only the essential files, Iris close behind her, Doyen leading them through a service corridor that smelled of dust and old paint toward a rear exit she had never used. But as they reached the stairwell door, it swung open from the other side before Doyen's hand touched it, and a man she did not recognize stood in the frame, gun already raised. Everything happened in fragments after that. Doyen's shout, the flash of movement as he threw himself between Naomi and the doorway, the crack of a single gunshot that seemed to swallow all other sound in the stairwell. Doyen staggered but did not fall, returning fire with a speed that told her this was not the first time he had done this. The gunman dropped. Somewhere behind them a second set of footsteps thundered up from the ground floor. "Move," Doyen barked, blood already darkening the shoulder of his jacket, and Naomi did not think. She acted, grabbing Iris by the wrist and hauling her toward the opposite stairwell, the one leading up rather than down, because down was where the second gunman's footsteps were coming from, and up led to the rooftop access she had noticed on a building tour months ago during the original contract negotiations. They burst onto the rooftop into cold evening air, the city spread out below them in 1,000 indifferent lights, and Naomi's mind moved faster than her fear, cataloging exits, distances. The fire escape bolted to the building's east face. She hauled the access door shut behind them and shoved a discarded metal pipe through the door handles, buying seconds she was not sure would be enough. "The fire escape," she said, already moving, pulling Iris with her.
Now.
They were 3 rungs down when the rooftop door burst open above them, the metal pipe clattering uselessly to the ground, and Naomi looked up to see a man with a gun leveling it toward them with a patience that told her he had done this before too. She shoved Iris ahead of her down the escape, putting her own body between the gun and her assistant without deciding to do it, some instinct older than fear taking command of her limbs. The shot never came. Instead, the man above them jerked sideways as a second figure slammed into him from the stairwell door, and Naomi realized with a lurch of recognition that it was Jian, having arrived she did not know how or when, moving through the fight with the same terrible precision he had described in his own hierarchy, a man born speaking the language of violence fluently. He disarmed the gunman in 3 motions, efficient and merciless, and the fight was over almost before Naomi understood it had truly begun. He turned to find her frozen on the fire escape, Iris trembling below her, and for a moment something raw and unguarded crossed his face, an expression she had never seen him wear, fear finally breaking through the calculation. "Are you hurt?"
No.
Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Doyen is. He took a bullet protecting us in the stairwell. He will live. I already have people moving to him." Jian crossed the rooftop and reached down to help her the rest of the way up, his hand closing around hers with a grip that shook almost imperceptibly, the first crack she had ever seen in his composure. "I told you I would keep you alive. I nearly failed." "You didn't fail." She let him pull her the rest of the way onto solid ground, chest still heaving from adrenaline. "I'm here. Because you moved fast enough to buy yourself time. Because you did not wait to be saved." Something fierce and proud moved through his expression, tangled together with the residue of fear. "Most people freeze. You did not freeze." I don't know how to be anything other than what I am, Jian. The rooftop wind pulled at her hair, and she found herself closer to him than she had intended, close enough to feel the tension still coiled in his body from the fight. Even married to a man who apparently commands small armies. I am glad of it. His hand had not left hers. I do not know how to be gentle, Naomi. I have spent too many years being the opposite of gentle to survive in this world. But I know that watching you disappear through that door was the closest I have come to understanding what my sister's death cost me, multiplied by everything I have wanted and refused to let myself have since. The confession hung between them, raw in a way his earlier admissions had not been, stripped of calculation entirely. She thought of the divorce papers again, still sitting in a folder somewhere in her hotel room, a document she had believed represented an ending. Standing here now, wind cutting across a rooftop with the taste of gunpowder still faint in the air, she was no longer certain what it represented at all. "We need to get off this roof," she said instead of answering the thing he had not quite asked. "And we need to find Sun Wuyang before he tries this again." Agreed. He did not release her hand as they moved back toward the stairwell, and she did not pull away. Doyen survived the gunshot wound, though the medical team Jen summoned kept him under close watch for the remainder of the night, and Naomi found herself unable to sleep once more, pacing the length of her room in the tower, while her mind replayed the stairwell, the rooftop, the particular way Jian's voice had cracked when he asked if she was hurt. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, she gave up on sleep entirely and made her way to his study, where a light still burned beneath the door. He was bent over a map of the city, sections marked in red ink, tracing what she assumed were Sun Wuyang's known properties and movements. He looked up when she entered, exhaustion evident in the set of his shoulders for the first time since she had known him. "You should be resting." "So should you." She moved to stand beside him, studying the map without really seeing it. "What's the plan?" "Yang has 3 properties in the city. A restaurant in Itaewon he uses as a front. A warehouse near the port he uses for storage of things he should not be storing. And an apartment in Gangnam he believes no one knows about." Jian's finger traced the 3rd marking. "That is where he will be tonight. He believes the attack on you failed cleanly enough that he has time before I retaliate." "He's wrong." "Yes." Something dangerous moved beneath the exhaustion in his voice. "He is very wrong. I want to be there." He looked at her sharply. "Absolutely not." "Jian, he tried to kill me. Twice, if you count the car. I am not going to sit in this tower drinking tea while you handle it for me." She met his gaze without flinching, the same steadiness that had carried her down a fire escape hours earlier. "I've spent my whole life being the person who fixes problems, not the person who waits for someone else to fix them. That does not stop because I married into your world. This is not a business negotiation, Naomi. This is people with guns." "I noticed." Her voice sharpened. "I was there for the last one, remember? I got Iris out. I did not wait for rescue. I am not asking you to hand me a weapon and let me walk in first. I am telling you that I am not going to be hidden away in a tower while my own attempted murder gets resolved without me in the room." He studied her for a long moment, something shifting behind his eyes that looked almost like respect fighting against every instinct that told him to lock her away for her own protection. "If you come, you follow every instruction I give without argument. The moment I tell you to move, you move."
No hesitation.
Agreed. "I mean it, Naomi. This is not the moment for your stubbornness." "I said agreed, Jian." Her voice softened slightly. "I trust you to keep me alive. I have evidence now that you're good at it." Something in his face eased at that, an admission she had not fully intended to make, but did not regret making. "Then we move at dawn, before Yang expects anyone to move at all." The apartment building in Gangnam rose in clean modern lines against the pale gray of early morning, and Naomi sat in the back of an unmarked car 3 blocks away while Jian's men moved into position with the quiet efficiency of people who had done this before and expected to do it again. She had been given clear instructions: stay in the car, stay low, do not exit until told, and she intended to follow them, right up until the moment the radio in the front seat crackled with a voice reporting that Yang had a second exit no one had accounted for, a service corridor leading to the parking garage, and that he was already moving through it. "He's heading for the garage," the driver said, already reaching for his own weapon. Naomi's mind moved through the geography of the building faster than she expected it to, remembering the layout from the property records Jian had shown her hours earlier. The garage exit fed onto a side street that connected, 2 blocks down, to the very street where their car was currently parked. If Yang made it to a vehicle, he would have to pass directly by them to reach the main road. "He's going to come right past us," she said. The driver was already moving to intercept, radioing the position to Jian's team, but in the chaos of shifting positions, Naomi caught sight of movement at the mouth of the alley beside their car, a figure moving low and fast, and she recognized with a jolt of certainty that it was Yang himself, having doubled back through a route the surveillance had not accounted for, clearly intending to use the parked car itself as cover or, worse, as a hostage situation waiting to happen.
She did not think.
She threw open the car door and stepped directly into his path, positioning her body between him and the driver's line of sight in a way that forced him to either engage her directly or reveal himself fully to the men now converging from 3 directions. "Sun Wuyang." Her voice came out steadier than her racing heart had any right to allow. "You tried to have me killed twice. I'd like to know why you think that was going to work." He froze, gun half raised, clearly recalculating a plan that had not accounted for the target confronting him directly in an alley at dawn. "You should not be here. Neither should you, apparently, given how badly this has gone for you." She kept her voice level, buying seconds, aware of movement closing in behind him even as she held his attention forward. "Jian knows everything. The shell company, the apartment, the restaurant. There's nowhere left for you to run that he hasn't already found." Yang's face twisted, calculation collapsing into something more desperate. "He took what was owed to me. The northern routes. My position. I built half of what he controls, and he gave it to someone else because I did not smile the way he preferred. That's not my problem. It became your problem the moment you married him." He raised the gun fully now, and Naomi's pulse spiked, but she held her ground, trusting the movement she could sense at the edges of her vision, trusting the man whose voice she had heard in a rooftop confession hours earlier promising her he would not fail her again. Jian emerged from the alley's far end with a speed she had not thought a man his size capable of, closing the distance before Yang could fully register the shift in the balance of the confrontation. The struggle that followed was brutal and brief, and Naomi watched it with a clarity that surprised her, no longer flinching from the violence her marriage had brought into her life, but understanding it now as the language this world spoke in place of diplomacy. When it ended, Yang lay disarmed and restrained on the pavement, and Jian stood over him breathing hard, a thin line of blood at his temple from a blow she had not seen land. "You are done," Jian said to the man on the ground, voice flat with a finality that needed no further explanation. Then he turned to Naomi, and the fury in his eyes was not directed at her, but at himself. "You stepped directly into a loaded gun. I bought time. You needed time." She held his gaze, refusing to apologize for a choice that had worked. "I told you I was not going to hide in the car while my own life got decided by everyone but me. You could have died. So could you, every time you walk into a room in this city. That's the marriage I signed on to, Jian, whether either of us admits it or not." Her voice softened despite the adrenaline still coursing through her. "I am not asking you to stop protecting me. I am asking you to let me protect myself too, sometimes, in ways that count." He crossed the space between them and, for the first time since she had known him, cupped her face in both hands with a tenderness that felt entirely unrehearsed, entirely unlike the careful, controlled man who ran an empire through stillness and precision. "You are the only person who has ever spoken to me like an equal rather than a threat to be managed. Maybe that's because I am your equal." "Yes." The word came out rough, almost involuntary. "I am beginning to understand that." Sun Wuyang was handed over to Jian's own internal justice, the details of which Naomi did not ask about and did not particularly want to know, and within a day the tension that had gripped the city, like a held breath, finally exhaled. The hospitality contract, remarkably, remained intact. Jian's organization had quietly ensured that the disruption never touched her firm's standing, and by the end of the week her original deal had closed exactly as planned, a strange and almost absurd footnote to everything that had happened around it. She found him on the balcony off his study 3 evenings later, the city spread out beneath them in its endless glittering sprawl, and she came to stand beside him without needing an invitation this time. "I still have the divorce papers," she said. "I assumed you might." He did not turn, though his hand found hers on the railing, an easy gesture now, no longer a negotiation. "Do you still want me to sign them?" She considered the question honestly, weighing it against everything the past week had shown her, the wound he carried for a sister he could not save, the fear that had cracked his composure on a rooftop, the way he had let her stand in danger because she demanded the right to protect herself rather than caging her the way his instincts screamed at him to. She thought of stability, of the ordinary life she had once imagined for herself, and found she no longer wanted it, not if it meant walking away from a man who had shown her, piece by piece, the difference between control and care.
No.
The word came easier than she expected. "I don't." "Why not?" He turned to face her now, and there was something almost fragile in the question, a man who did not trust good things to stay simply because he wanted them to. "Because you didn't lock me in a tower when I refused to stay in the car. Because you told me the truth about your sister instead of hiding behind the version of yourself that never explains anything. Because when Yang had a gun pointed at me, the only thing on your face was fear for me, not for your empire." She stepped closer, close enough now that she could feel the warmth radiating from him in the cool evening air. "I came to Seoul to close a hotel deal. I did not come here to fall in love with the most dangerous man in the city. But here we are. Here we are." He said it like a vow, low and certain, and when he finally kissed her it was not the calculated, careful gesture she might have expected from a man who measured every move he made. It was hungry and a little desperate, and entirely without the precision that governed every other part of his life, as though for once he had let something in himself move without calculation. When they broke apart, the city lights blurring gold and white beneath them, she rested her forehead against his chest and felt, for the first time since she had signed a marriage license she believed would only ever be a business arrangement, something that felt unmistakably like home. "I am still going to argue with you," she warned him. "About everything. About how much control you think you get to have over my safety. I would expect nothing less." His arms tightened around her, and in his voice she heard something that had not been there when she first arrived in his office demanding a signature, something unguarded, something that sounded almost like relief. "I do not want a wife who agrees with everything I say, Naomi. I have an entire organization full of men who do that already. I want the one person who has never been afraid to tell me I am wrong." "Good," she murmured against him, "because I am planning on doing that for a very long time." Below them, Seoul carried on the way it always did, indifferent to the two people standing 60 floors above its streets who had, against every reasonable expectation, chosen each other not out of obligation or contract, but because somewhere between a stairwell gunfight and a rooftop confession, they had each found in the other the one thing neither of them had known they were looking for. If this story pulled you in the way it pulled us writing it, hit that like button and drop a comment telling us which part had you holding your breath. Subscribe for more dark romance stories like this one, and we will see you in the next story.